The Living Zen-podcast is a gift from the Victoria Zen Centre. If you enjoy it, please forget about making a donation. Instead, rate it, review it, and share it with a friend that you think will enjoy it as much as you did. You may also consider purchasing the Living Zen podcast app, which is now available on the iTunes App Store. Thank you for listening. Case 11. Zhaozhou and the Hermits. Zhaozhou went to a hermit's cottage and asked, "Anybody in? Anybody in?" The hermit lifted up his fist. Zhaozhou said, "The water is too shallow for a ship to anchor," and he left. Again he went to a hermit's cottage and asked, "Anybody in? Anybody in?" This hermit too lifted up his fist. Zhaozhou said, "Freely you give, freely you take away, freely you kill, freely you give life," and he made a full bow. Mumonkan says, both held up their fists in the same way. Why did Zhaozhou approve of one and not the other? Tell me, what is the core of the complication? If you can give a turning word on this matter, you will realize that Zhaozhou's tongue has no bone in it. He is free, now helping others stand up, now pushing them down. Be that as it may, can you realize also that Zhaozhou was seen through by the two hermits? Furthermore, if you say that one of the hermits was superior to the other, you do not yet have the eye of reflective study. And if you say there is no difference between them, you do not yet have the eye of reflective study. Mumonkan's verse says, "Eye like a shooting star, activity like lightning, the sword that kills, the sword that gives life." Right, 3 bells. There's a copy of this case under all of your cushions if you want to follow along. So here we have our old friend Zhaozhou, Joshu in Japanese. And by now we should be becoming aware of his ability or his significance in this Zen school. We're at case 11 in the Mumonkan, and this is his third appearance. We met him first in the first koan, Joshu's or Zhaozhou's Mu. And then we met him again in, I think it's number 7, Wash Your Bowls. And here he is again, bugging these hermits. So, hermits, these aren't just sort of guys that live up in the mountains because they don't like people. In the old days in China, a person's practice as a monk went through various phases. So initially you would practice with a local temple. You know, just a interested person. Maybe you want to learn a bit about meditation or a little bit about this Buddhist or Zen wisdom. And so you practice with somebody nearby that knows a little bit. But if you want to practice, really deepen in practice, maybe become a monk, you would travel to a training center where you meet a teacher. And sometimes this would take a little while because you might go to one hearing about a teacher and you would go there and just not a connection, just not a solid meeting. You don't want to stay there. So you go and you find another teacher. And all of this was, of course, done on foot. So this could also take a number of years. So a person had to have a very strong motivation, interest in pursuing this Dharma. So eventually finding your teacher and training with them, practicing with them, you would practice with them for a number of years, maybe 3 years or 5 years or 10 years or 20 years. And then at a certain point, the teacher would say, "Get out." when I was practicing with Joshi Roshi, he explained that the term that we use for a training center, or a place of practice in English, is a monastery. And he told me that this is a really bad translation, because our idea of a monastery is a place where we go to escape the world. And it's a place where we go with some idea of staying there, permanence. And he said that the term in Japanese was Senmon Dojo, which more accurately translates as a training center. So it's a place where you go to train. Having trained there for a while, the teacher says, okay, now go. You need to leave the training center, take your training, and go live it, go out. So the practice for monks at that point would be to travel around different training centers. Just traveling as practice itself as one, but also just moving around, and if you hear of such and such a teacher, go and see that teacher. And check out your own wisdom. Check out what that teacher is doing. Check out what that community is. Go and spar with those people in Dharma. Maybe there's an old hermit living in the hills that people go to, or maybe people have heard about such and such a master at such and such a temple. And so, as a journeyman practitioner, this would be the practice of going around and traveling, visiting other teachers. And then, for many teachers, many monks, after a period of pilgrimage or traveling around and visiting different teachers, they would find a nice view somewhere, or a nice situation that befitted them, that spoke to their inclinations. And they would either find some old abandoned hut, or they'd build one out of whatever debris was around, and they would just start to practice as the master of a hermitage. And that's often what would happen, is that a person at this point in their practice, the villagers or people would start to see them. People would start to visit them or speak to them. And often some of the biggest temples were built around the hermitage of a particular teacher. Or else the reputation of that teacher would expand to such a degree that some big noble person, rich person, emperor, king, would summon them, would make them come to the capital, or would make them come to a particular temple, so that they themselves could go more conveniently to see this teacher. So what's suggested in this case is that Zhaozhou was famous for he lived till 120, is what the legend tells us. And so his period of pilgrimage, of going around and testing people, checking himself out, was unusually long. It's supposedly it was around 20 years that he did this for, just going around and checking on different teachers. But it's hard to be sure where in his career this was, because also once he had finally settled down and had a temple, he was also famous for sort of like putting on sort of lower clothes and then going out as the great master Joshu in disguise to test people that he would hear about. Someone would say, "Oh, did you hear about such and such?" And there's actually other cases. And he would test anybody. He would go and check it out with the Dharma out with anybody. There's stories of him going and visiting tea ladies that had said something profound and checking them out, and these hermits. So what we have here is Zhaozhou either at a point where he's on pilgrimage, or maybe at a point where he's already established his temple, going out sort of to check out these hermits. So the first line, the first part of it. Zhaozhou went to a hermit's cottage and asked, "Anybody in? Anybody in?" And this seems a fairly benign sentence, just sort of setting the scene. Until, again, I have to remind us, as we're investigating koan, not to approach, not to consider, not to contemplate, investigate a koan in two dimensions as a flat thing. Not to look at this scene, look at this situation, look at this interaction like a television program as a bystander, an external bystander. We have to bring ourselves into the situation. We have to bring ourselves into the spherical, experiential presence of the case. We have to be able to transform, to morph ourselves from one position to the next in order to actually see what's going on, in order to experience what this case, legal case, koan comes from this idea of a public case. What's being demonstrated publicly in this case, we must come to experience for ourselves. So when we talk about a hermit's cottage, we're talking about literally a hut, a shack. If it was the size of this zendo to the fireplace and the walls, that would be a mansion as a hermitage. And so for Zhaozhou to go open the door of this cottage and say, "Anybody in?" He's not asking if anybody's home, because the master of the hermitage is probably sitting there looking at him. So this is very much how we use in the vernacular, when we see somebody who's kind of stunned, we say, "Hey, anybody home?" Meaning like, "What's here? What are you there? What's here?" And as this is a Dharma challenge, that's exactly what he's saying. What is it? Do you have anything to say? Can you offer a turning word? All of this comes out in his presentation. He comes in and he says, "Is there anybody here? Show it to me." It's a challenge. He's throwing down the glove. Of course, this is not strange behavior. Maybe if we were sitting at home having tea or something and somebody popped in the door and said, "Hey, what are you doing? Show it to me," we might find it strange. But having burst in or opened the door on a ripened or an experienced practitioner who is in a hermitage, this is not even strained. It must be a very disrupted life as a hermit, having these rude people burst in on you all the time and say, "Show me!" So the hermit lifts a fist, demonstrates. This is very similar, as we can go back. We have this example in the Mumonkan of Gute's finger. Every time somebody asked a question about the Dharma, Gute just raises his finger. Maybe it was the boy who's grown up and he has no finger to lift, so he just lifts his fist. I don't know. But he makes his demonstration, lifts his fist. And Zhaozhou says, "The water is too shallow for a ship to anchor." Zhaozhou, this is sort of, if you get to know Zhaozhou a little bit more, this is a metaphor that he uses often. When he's traveling and poking on people and testing people, he often uses this metaphor that I'm testing the depth of the water. And there's a great interaction between him and another teacher, the abbot of a monastery, where he carries this big stick and he gets to the monastery and the master says, "What's the stick for?" And Zhaozhou says, "Well, I've come to check the depth of the water." And the master says, Well, unfortunately, you won't find a drop here. And Zhaozhou left satisfied. So he's making a criticism. There's not enough water even here for a great vessel of the Dharma such as myself to even anchor. And he turns around and leaves. Again, he went to a hermit's cottage and asked, "Is there anybody in? Is there anybody in?" This hermit, too, lifted up his fist. So one of the interesting things, maybe I'll come back to that. So again, the same gesture, lifts up his fist. And Zhaozhou said, "Freely you give, freely you take away, freely you kill, freely you give life." And he made a full bow. So he prostrates, he goes right down to the ground, puts his forehead on the ground and raises his hands to accept the feet of the teacher. This case is like, in presenting this case, it's like Mumonkan lays out a cloth for us and puts us in the middle and then slowly picks up the four corners to catch us. That's great. So there's a number of things about this koan that we need to really look at. Who's the better hermit is the first question that I want to ask you. What's the test? I think it's really easy for us to look at the flat interaction and stop to say, clearly, Zhaozhou is the Zen master, and so he goes out and he asks this question, this demonstration of the hermit. And judging by his response, we would have to give the battle to the first hermit, the second hermit, sorry. The first hermit is a really sad excuse. The water is too shallow for a ship to anchor. Clearly, he's been wasting his time. He's been traveling around and visiting teachers, and maybe it's just some bum that's hiding up in a hut pretending to be a Zen teacher, and Zhaozhou has completely seen through him. We say, the second hermit, wonderful. Look at that. Zhaozhou, the great Zen master, after you demonstrate with your fist, he prostrates himself. There's a wonderful trick, or there's a wonderful situation in this case in the Chinese, which is that there is a question whether there are two hermits. The way that the case is phrased, it's entirely possible that this is the same hermit, that this is the same hermitage, that the scene plays out twice with the same physical response, with entirely polar reactions from Zhaozhou. This case represents, again, as always, these cases do, ourselves. Where is the test? The test, the response, the reaction is not elucidated. It's not expressed because we have to experience it for ourselves. When you meet a teacher, when you meet a circumstance, when you meet your life, an activity, and it makes a demand of you, and you demonstrate wholeheartedly, you present yourself unquestioningly to the teacher, to the situation, to your partner, to your relationship, to your activity, your work. What happens? What happens when, having presented yourself, having wholeheartedly given yourself, having completely dissolved into the situation, what happens when the receiver, when the teacher, when the partner says, "That's no good"? What does the hermit do when Zhaozhou says, "That answer's bullshit. The water here is too shallow to even park my boat"? Zhaozhou responds in such a way, looking at the face of the hermit. What does the hermit do? How do we respond? Is there this, "Oh, shit, I missed it"? Has the hermit demonstrated it clearly, and Zhaozhou slamming him? Is the hermit able to know? Is the hermit able to completely be rest with nothing more to do, nothing to prove, nowhere to go? Or does he suddenly spiral into this, "Oh, I could have done it better. Oh, I could have. Oh, that was no good. Oh, I'm no good"? The flip side is the same situation. What happens when the hermit, having presented his fist, having made this wholehearted effort to demonstrate this great matter, sees Zhaozhou, this interloper, suddenly drop down to the ground in a full prostration? Zhaozhou, I see, sort of looking up through the corner of his eye as he does this prostration to see the face of the hermit. Is he smiling? Is he gloating? Is he thinking, "Ha ha! I showed you, Zhaozhou"? And the question is also for us, is this something that we engage in? Is this something that we fall into? This case is utterly important in practice. It's utterly important, I think, in life. It is the investigation of how we go about applying ourselves, how we go about engaging in the activity of our life. Are we always checking as we do things? When I ring the bell, am I looking out the corner of my eye to see what the abbot's doing, what the shika's doing? When I'm making an offering to the Butsudan, am I worried about what's happening? If I am corrected, do I immediately spiral down? Do I get aggressive? Do I say, "Oh, this is so stupid"? Do I say, "Oh, I'm no good"? When I do something right, when it goes just so, and I'm able to fully come to completion in the activity, in the next moment, do I indulge in pride? Am I all inflated, better than? This practice is about, this case is about manifesting clearly beyond doubt, without hesitation, without reservation, and the clarity, the equanimity that arises out of knowing in that moment, knowing for yourself this completion. Somebody can say, "That's no good." And from this position, there is no movement. There is no question. There is no doubt. Great Master Zhaozhou can criticize you. Buddha himself could say, "You're no good." And there's no phasing. There's no question. There's no doubt. The stingiest Russian judge might say, "That's amazing!" And, well, I'd say it in Russian, I'm sure, but you would say, "Meh." It's just the manifestation of true nature. Nothing big, nothing special. Zhaozhou tests these hermits. Tests them and tests them, or maybe he tests this hermit, poor guy. Zhaozhou picking on him all the time. So the practice of this case is to investigate this question, this interaction, this situation in your own life, to be aware of it, to be aware of how we plummet when we meet with the disapproval of the people around us, how we ascend to heights when we meet with yes and good, and how temporary, how transient, how fragile is our mental state, is the way that we hold on to ourselves when we experience life like this. This case, what Zhaozhou is testing, what he's asking for a demonstration of, is the unshakable mind, which is the manifestation of zero. Shunyata, mu, emptiness, one true nature, however you like to experience it. Like to express it, sorry. He says, can you show it? Can you demonstrate? Is there anybody in? He asks. So, there's this physical demonstration. And Zhaozhou says, I've seen lots of physical demonstrations. What happens if I go another question, another demonstration? What happens if I push you further? That's great! We think the test is over, but it's just begun. This is the when we are engaged in practices like Sesshin or Zazenkai, this is one of the real areas that can come to the fore. The ups and downs of the personal I am self. This is how we can sometimes walk into a talk or walk into an interview feeling lower than low. And we can walk out feeling higher than high. Or vice versa. We can go into interview feeling like $1 million and completely inflated and come out feeling like a flat tire. Both, Wu Men says, both held up their fists in the same way. Both give this demonstration, fully manifesting. So why did Zhaozhou approve of one and not the other? Tell me, what's the core of the complication? If you can give me a turning word on this matter, you will realize that Zhaozhou's tongue has no bone in it. This is just I think the image is fairly clear. His ability to move, his ability to respond, his ability to meet the situation and turn it, to continuously be presenting the Dharma, to continuously be acting in a way which awakens, teaching, is unmatched. This no bone in his tongue, there's no rigidity, there's no linear. There's no fixation. It moves freely. This is one of the real challenges with Zen practice. We establish a form, but we're dealing with discrete points in activity. When we have a Dharma talk, we're not just talking. There are a particular group of people in a particular situation at a particular time. What is said here cannot be said in another place, in another time, to another group of people. When a person is engaged in the activity of doing an officer role, it's not the same role that every other person has done. It's a different situation. It's a different person. It's a different mind. Some people will complain or will be afeared, be scared by a correction. A particular student will receive a particular tone or type of correction, and another student will receive the opposite. There's no rhyme or reason, it seems. When people come to interview, sometimes Eshu is up, friendly, kind. Sometimes he is down and mean and surly. We think, oh, Eshu's in a bad mood. Eshu's in a good mood. Eshu doesn't like that student. Eshu really likes that student. This is not trying to deliver something which is two-dimensional and flat. It's not trying to deliver something which is conceptually based or comprehensible with the thinking, rational mind. This is a practice which grabs us where we are, grabs us in what we're doing, and reveals something which is beyond words, something which is beyond concept, which is entirely conceptual. And so when it talks about Zhaozhou, he in Zen is very much the example of a teacher who moves freely, who's able to meet each situation spontaneously. When we look at things two-dimensionally, when we look at this case, we say, certainly the case is that one of these hermits is better than the other. And Zhaozhou, being this sort of fixed point, has this perspective on judgment, has this ability to grade them, and also has that intention that he's going around for the function of grading people, comparing them to himself. This is a very subjective, one-sided perspective of how a master would work, how a master works. A bodhisattva, awakening being, one who awakens. Both we can understand this as somebody who is awakening, in the process of awakening, but also someone whose very activity is to awaken every situation, to awaken every being. So when we take up this case with a completely different perspective, what is Zhaozhou's function? What is he engaged in when he interacts with these hermits? What's he doing? If you can give a turning word on this matter, you will realize that Zhaozhou's tongue has no bone in it. He is free, now helping others stand up, now pushing them down. It sounds very rough. We like to always think of a teacher being kind and gentle and helping us up. But in this school, it's understood that there are two sides. That there is a time where we need the soft, loving compassion, the elixir of kindness of Avalokiteshvara. And we recognize that there are times when we need the sword of Manjushri. Each of us prefers one. Each of us angles towards one and away from another. But the presentation or the representation of Zhaozhou in this situation is that freely, without even a ripple, this master transforms one to the other, recognizing that these are not two, but they're manifestations of the origin. They are manifestations, personifications of aspects of completeness, our true nature. Be that as it may, can you realize also that Zhaozhou was seen through by the two hermits? Again, we look at this as these poor, innocent, ignorant hermits in their huts being accosted by this styling Zen master. But this is not the case either. Each of them sees Zhaozhou as he enters the hermitage. Each of them knows what's happening. Each of them makes their presentation. It's suggested that each of them clearly understands what has taken place. There has to be this recognition when we enter into relationship with one another, when we enter into relationship with objects in interactions, in activities, we have to be able to see through that which is facing us, which is to say, we can't get caught up on the surface. We can't get caught up on the world of differentiation only. We can't get caught up in I am me, you are you. I am this, you are that. I'm over here, you're over there. I'm the teacher, you're the student. We have to be able to drop that away in the interaction and fundamentally recognize this is true self meeting true self. They're not two. We have to recognize ourselves in each activity that we engage in each interaction, in each relationship. And this is what he comes to, Wu Men comes to in the next part. Furthermore, if you say that one of the hermits was superior to the other, you do not yet have the eye of reflective study. Sasaki Roshi translates this, you do not yet have the eye of Zen. And if you say there is no difference between them, you do not yet have the eye of reflective study, or the eye of Zen. It seems to be difficult for many people. Either they are the same or they're different. Either one is superior to the other or not. But this statement sort of catches us between and points to what I've been speaking to in each of these cases. Not the flat perspective, not the subject perspective, not the dualistic perspective, but the whole, the spherical, the complete perspective which understands nature, shunyata, emptiness, and understands manifestation also. We can't get caught up. We can't get caught up in thinking, oh, this guy is better than that guy. I'm better than you. I need to work a little bit harder. You need to work a little bit harder, and then you'll be better than me. That can't be our complete understanding of things. But also, our complete understanding of things can't be all is one. There is no separation. There is no duality. Your car cannot truly be yours, and therefore I can drive it. This is also misguided. This case points to these two sides that simultaneously we have to grasp, we have to manifest, we have to come into relationship with these two activities simultaneously. When we come to this awareness, when we come to this experience of this being just so, this is just the situation, then how can we say it? How can you express that? How can you manifest and demonstrate? What is there that you can show that says, I see? Wu Men's verse says, "I, like a shooting star, activity like lightning, the sword that kills, the sword that gives life." This is talking about Zhaozhou is one way of understanding this, but it is also talking about our function when we are able to hold this position, when we're able to take up this seat which knows both sides. Zhaozhou is able to see clearly what's going on and is able to respond to it without fussing about sort of, is this the right thing? Maybe I should. I don't know about this. There is no hesitation, no resistance. Nothing is missed by the eye, and the response comes faster than lightning. Killing what needs to be killed. Cutting off attachments. This is both the sword that kills, the sword that gives life, the blade that gives life. Freely acting, freely responding, freely correcting, freely praising, helping somebody stand up and pushing them down. But why? Where is it coming from? Okay, this case, as usual, is a very important one. And again, it's also one of my favorites. Very challenging. Very challenging, I find, because it so powerfully confronts one of our real, I think, as a human being, if you don't find yourself falling into this, if you don't know that you do this, if you're unaware of how much of our day we spend looking for praise, how much of our day we spend trying to avoid criticism, if we are unaware of the behaviors that we engage in based just on these two activities, then I think we should really look deeper, pay more attention, really listen to what's going on in your head and in your heart throughout a day, and you will find it shocking. Coming to this place of practice, what we're doing when we engage in this practice is to ring the bell, to sit, to walk, to engage in any activity that we're engaged in with such wholeheartedness, with such completion, with such with everything that we've got, leaving no room for doubt, leaving no room for criticism, leaving no need for praise. I can't do any better than that. I can't give any more than that because I've given it all. So whether you praise me or not is irrelevant. It was fully done. Whether you criticize me or not, I can't do more because unquestioningly I have fully done. So these simple practices that we engage in, ringing bells, bowing, sitting, they're simple activities. Simple activities in the hope or in the aspiration or in the practice that by practicing fully, dissolving, fully giving yourself, fully manifesting this activity of sitting, this activity of ringing the bell, this activity of bowing, of walking, of eating our food, that more and more we're able to let go of the need for praise. It's not to say that we should stop people from giving us praise. It's not to say that when someone criticizes us, we should just ignore what they're saying. But it's to recognize that how we hold ourselves, our value, our understanding of who we truly are, does not inflate when we're praised, does not deflate, implode when we're criticized. That we can rest knowing ourselves as complete in each activity. We can face praise and we can face criticism without it being about our fundamental nature, which we know to be complete. We don't become better if we do things good. We don't become worse if we make a mistake or if we screw something up. Our value is unincreased, undiminished, and is equal to the value of all things. There's a lot in this case. So this little scene of Zhaozhou knocking on people's doors and asking if anyone's home is a bit deceiving. So I'll leave it there because I've been talking for a while. But thank you very much. And give this one some thought. Give this one some space as we practice today. Right. The Living Zen podcast is a gift from the Victoria Zen Centre. If you enjoy it, please forget about making a donation. Instead, rate it, review it, and share it with a friend that you think will enjoy it as much as you did. You may also consider purchasing the Living Zen podcast app, which is now available on the iTunes App Store. Thank you for listening.